Beloved friends, let us come together for a few quiet moments and remember something profoundly simple, yet entirely transformative. The spiritual path is never a matter of acquiring new powers, new beliefs, or new techniques. It is always a matter of recognizing what already is. We are never trying to become something. We are awakening to what has been present from the beginning. And so, as we begin our time together, let us return to those words spoken by the Master Christ Jesus, words so familiar that their true meaning has been overlooked for nearly 2,000 years. He said, I am, not as a person, not as a man, not as a separate being standing before humanity, but as the announcement of divine presence appearing as individual consciousness. When Jesus uttered the words, I am, he was not proclaiming personal greatness. He was not offering us a statement about his human identity. He was revealing the nature of God as the very essence of conscious being. And until we understand this, we misunderstand everything. For generations, the world has believed that I am was the declaration of a unique individual endowed with powers unavailable to the rest of us. But I say to you today, as Joel Goldsmith has always said, that the I am Jesus spoke was not personal. It was the infinite presence of God announcing itself at the center of awareness. It was the one declaring its own nature. This is the great secret hidden in plain sight. This is the truth that every genuine spiritual healing, every moment of liberation, every experience of peace must rest upon. And this is the beginning of our journey together today. Now, I wish to draw your attention to something remarkable. Long before modern science had the language to describe it, long before psychology or neuroscience spoke of identity and consciousness, long before any laboratory could measure the effects of awareness on the human brain, the mystics knew consciousness is cause. What you identify as I becomes the law unto your experience. It becomes the organizing principle of your entire life. The world believes that the body determines consciousness, that the brain determines thought, that the environment shapes identity. But I say to you, as the infinite way reveals, that identity shapes experience and consciousness shapes form, not the other way around. And as surprising as it may seem, the discoveries of modern science have begun to echo this ancient, eternal truth. They confirm, not in mystical language, not in poetry, but in biology and physics, that who you believe yourself to be, who you declare yourself to be, quite literally rewires the brain, reshapes perception, reorders emotion, and reorganizes the structure of your life. This is why every time you say, I am sick, I am afraid, I am powerless, you feel the body respond, the mind constrict, the emotions collapse. You are not observing reality, you are creating it through misidentification. You are using the sacred name of God to declare limitation. You see, the world thinks in terms of problems and solutions, causes and effects, sickness and healing, but the mystic thinks in only one language, identity. To the degree that you identify with the personal sense of self, you live in struggle. To the degree that you recognize I am as the presence of God, you live in freedom. And so, as we enter this study of I am, not merely as a phrase, but as the essence of Christ consciousness, I invite you to set down every preconceived notion about spirituality. Set aside everything you have believed God to be. Release every attempt to make something happen. We are not here to practice positive thinking. We are not here to persuade God to act. We are here to witness the truth that the infinite is already acting as our consciousness, already appearing as the very awareness through which we are listening in this moment. In the minutes ahead, we will walk together through a profound recognition that the words I am spoken by the Master are far more than spiritual language. They are the gateway between the finite and the infinite, between the personal sense of self and the divine identity that has always been our own. Let us be still. Let us listen. Let us allow the truth to reveal itself, not through effort, not through seeking, but through gentle recognition. For the I am is here. It is present. It is the life of your consciousness. And as we continue, you will discover why this recognition alone is the beginning of all true transformation, spiritual, emotional, and even physical. This is the doorway. Let us walk through it together. Beloved friends, as we continue in this meditation of truth, let us come gently to the center of Goldsmith's entire message. If there is one teaching that forms the foundation of all spiritual realization, all healing, all supply, all peace, it is this: the true meaning of I am. The world has repeated these words for centuries, sometimes as affirmation, sometimes as prayer, sometimes as doctrine, yet very few have paused long enough to ask, who is the I that speaks? For until we answer this question, nothing in spiritual life can unfold rightly. When Jesus said, I am, he was not referring to a man speaking. The I was not the carpenter's son. It was not a human identity standing above others. It was the infinite invisible, the eternal presence announcing itself as the consciousness appearing in that moment. And so let us be still with this. The I am is not personal. The I am is not human. The I am is not limited, temporary, or vulnerable. The I am is God. The I am is spirit. The I am is the one self, expressing through the instrument we call you. This distinction is the fulcrum upon which the entire spiritual path rests. For the great mistake of humanity has always been to assume that the consciousness saying I am is the little self, the personality with its history, its fears, its desires, its ambitions. But I tell you, as I have taught for many decades, that the personal sense of I is the very veil that hides the infinite from your awareness. Let me say it another way. Every hardship, every limitation, every conflict begins with the belief, I am a separate self. Every healing, every release, every revelation begins with the recognition, I am the presence of God. This is not metaphysics. This is not philosophy. This is identity. This is truth. When you say, I am tired, you are not describing a condition. You are identifying yourself as a limited organism. When you say, I am afraid, you are not reporting emotion. You are declaring separation from infinite presence. When you say, I am sick, you are not observing fact. You are clothing the divine with garments that do not belong to it. But when you pause quietly, reverently, and remember, I am the presence that knows, the presence that sees, the presence that is, you shift the entire center of your being out of the finite and into the infinite. This is why Goldsmith insisted that the beginning of spiritual life is impersonalization. You must separate the I of God from the I of personality. You must learn to hear the difference between the voice of the personal sense of self and the still, pure, wordless awareness of the divine. For the divine never says, I lack. The divine never says, I fear. The divine never says, I need. The divine says only one thing, eternally and silently, I am. and that I am is your consciousness. Let this sink deeply. God does not enter into your consciousness from the outside. God does not visit you in moments of prayer. God does not come and go. God is the very consciousness by which you are aware of existence at this moment. To understand I am is to understand that the self you have been seeking, the self you have been praying to, the self you have hoped to find in visions or miracles, has been the one looking through your eyes from the beginning. Do you see why this is the master key? Do you see why every spiritual realization begins with this recognition? It is because the moment you stop declaring the I of personality and begin resting in the I am of divine identity, you cease living as the struggling human and begin living as the instrument of infinite presence. The body remains, the personality remains, the world around you remains, but you no longer live from them. You live through them as the eternal principle that animates all life. This is Christ consciousness. Not a mystical state, not an emotional high, not a supernatural experience, but the simple, profound recognition that I am is the infinite self, the same yesterday, today, and forever. When you grasp this truth, not intellectually, but through deep inner recognition, you discover that every miracle recorded in Scripture, every healing in Goldsmith's ministry, every transformation of circumstance flowed from only one source. The shift of identity from the personal to the infinite. Let this truth rest within you. Let it reveal itself silently. You need not force it. You need only listen. For the I am is here. It has always been here. It is the one living itself as your very awareness. And now, let us continue deeper. Beloved friends, let us remain in this atmosphere of peace as we take another step into the nature of truth. For truth is never separated from life. It is never detached from experience. It is not something we believe about God. It is the very activity of God expressing as our consciousness. And so today, we look upon something that the world calls science, but which the mystic recognizes as simply another language through which the infinite reveals its own nature. We look upon the workings of the brain, not to magnify the brain, not to worship the organism, but to understand how the physical instrument responds to the consciousness that governs it. You see, the world has long assumed that the brain creates consciousness, but the mystic knows that consciousness forms the brain, shapes the brain, instructs the brain. The brain is not the creator, it is the instrument. It is the visible outline of invisible activity. It is the servant, never the master. And so we begin with a simple truth. Your sense of I determines the signals your brain obeys. When you say, I am afraid, the brain mobilizes fear responses because it believes it is receiving command from the center of identity. When you say, I am alone, the brain withdraws into protection because it assumes separation is true. When you say, I am sick, the brain interprets the statement as a declaration of identity rather than a passing condition. You may believe you are merely describing an experience, but you are not describing, you are declaring. You are placing the sacred name of God before a false concept of yourself and commanding the brain to construct a world consistent with that false identity. This is why Joel Goldsmith never taught us to affirm the truth in order to change reality. He taught us to recognize the truth of identity so that reality reorganizes itself without effort. The brain is obedient. It does not argue. It does not question. It does not analyze. It simply follows the identity you present to it. Declare yourself limited, and it activates patterns of limitation. Recognize yourself as infinite presence, and it ceases its frantic struggle to protect a self that does not exist. Now, let us open this gently. Modern language tells us that the brain reshapes itself according to repeated identity statements, a principle it calls neuroplasticity. But long before science gave a name to this process, the mystics already knew that what you hold as I becomes law to your experience. When the personal sense of self declares, I am exhausted, the brain responds with chemical patterns of depletion. When the personal sense of self says, I am not enough, the brain withdraws, closes, and contracts. When the personal sense of self fears the future, the brain prepares for threat. But when the spiritual sense of identity quietly recognizes, I am the presence of God appearing as this consciousness now, something entirely different takes place. The fear circuits begin to quiet. The emotional turbulence begins to settle. The thoughts that once rushed to defend a vulnerable identity lose their urgency. The nervous system shifts into coherence, not by effort, not by discipline, but by recognition. This is what Goldsmith meant when he said, rest in the I am. He was not offering comfort. He was describing how divine identity expresses through form. For the moment you withdraw identification from the personal I, the physical organism follows. The body relaxes. The mind clears. The emotional vibrations soften. The brain ceases to anticipate harm, and a new pattern begins to unfold, a pattern consistent with the infinite rather than the finite. Do you see how beautifully this aligns with the eternal truth? Science tells us that the default mode network, the region of the brain associated with self-referential thought, quiets during deep awareness. The mystic tells us that the personal self dissolves when the I am is recognized. Science tells us that repeated identity statements create neural pathways. The mystic tells us that consciousness determines form. Science tells us that perception is shaped by expectation. The mystic tells us that appearances are the outer expression of inner recognition. Both speak the same language, though one speaks from the outside and the other from the within. Now hear this gently. The purpose of this teaching is not to manipulate the brain. We do not seek improved biology. We seek truth. The harmony in the body follows naturally. When you rest in the spiritual meaning of I am, you are not trying to create better health. You are recognizing that health is the natural condition of the infinite expressing as form. When you rest in the truth of I am as supply, you are not trying to manifest abundance. You are recognizing that infinite being is complete, whole, and forever, expressing itself without lack. Identity does not fix the brain. Identity reveals that the brain has never been the center of power. And so, beloved friends, let us be still again. Let us come inward. Let us listen. The one who says, I am in this moment, not the lips, not the personality, not the history, but the one who is aware of being aware. That one is the infinite, the eternal, the Christ. Your brain listens to the I you believe you are. The world conforms to the I you believe you are. Your life unfolds according to the I you believe you are. Therefore, let the I that speaks be no longer the personal, fearful, limited sense of self. Let it be the I am, the presence, the life, the one without beginning or end. And the transformation will begin, not because you caused it, but because you removed the veil that prevented it. In this recognition, everything aligns, everything quiets, everything becomes simple again. Let us continue deeper. Beloved friends, let us continue in this sacred silence of recognition. For now, we come to a very important point, one that must be understood clearly if we are to walk the spiritual path with confidence and peace. Every form of human suffering begins with one fundamental mistake. Not many mistakes, not a variety of causes, not an array of problems scattered across life's circumstances, just one. The belief that I is the personal sense of self. This is the entire root of spiritual error. If you trace every fear, every limitation, every conflict back to its origin, you will always find that it begins with a false I am. The suffering does not come from the circumstance itself. It comes from the identity you bring to it. When you say, I am afraid, you have first assumed that you are a self separate from infinite presence, and only then does fear appear. When you say, I am sick, you have first accepted the belief that the body is your identity, and only then does illness become your experience. When you say, I am lacking, you have first mistaken yourself for a limited organism, and only then do you perceive the world as withholding good from you. Do you see? The circumstance is not the cause. The identity behind the statement is the cause. This is why Goldsmith taught that error is never personal wrongdoing. Error is not sin in the moral sense. Error is not a failure of character, nor is it a punishment from a divine power outside yourself. Error is simply misidentification, the belief that the I of your being is the finite self. Let us look gently at this. When the personal sense of I speaks, it cannot help but speak falsehood. It says, I am worried, because it identifies as a small self dependent upon circumstance. It says, I am powerless, because it believes it is separate from the source of life. It says, I am broken, because it thinks the body and the mind are the truth of its nature. But the I that Jesus declared, the I that is your true identity, never speaks these words. The I am of God cannot be afraid, cannot be weak, cannot be lacking, cannot be sinful, cannot be sick. It can only declare itself as what it eternally is. The presence, the life, the light of God as the center of being. Every false I am is a veil drawn across the infinite. Every true I am is the revelation of your divine identity. This is why, beloved friends, Goldsmith insisted that healing is never a matter of correcting conditions. It is always a matter of correcting identification. A false sense of self has spoken, a false statement, and the body, mind, and world have conformed to it. The moment you withdraw identity from the personal self, the entire appearance begins to dissolve. Not because you made it dissolve, but because you ceased sustaining it. Let me put this plainly. False identity produces false experience. True identity reveals true experience. Now hear this gently, for it is crucial. The moment you say, I am discouraged, you are not reporting a fact. You are creating the condition through identification with the limited self. But the moment you turn silently within and recognize, I am the presence of God appearing as this awareness, you cut the root of every belief that could ever produce fear or limitation. In that moment, you do not need to make courage appear. You do not need to create strength. You do not need to force the mind into optimism. The impersonal truth of being reveals itself simply by withdrawing identification from the personal self. This is the mystery. False I am statements bind you. True I am recognition frees you, not through effort, not through discipline, not through words repeated mechanically, but through the shift of identity. Every sincere spiritual seeker has tried to change their thoughts. Every one of them has attempted to force positivity, to rearrange beliefs, to overcome negativity by human effort. And every one of them has discovered that this approach fails because it begins with the assumption that the personal sense of I has power. Goldsmith's teaching removes the burden altogether. You do not change your thoughts. You change the I who is thinking them. When the wrong I speaks, even the right thought becomes powerless. When the right I am is recognized, even the appearance of wrong thought dissolves by itself. So do not struggle with your thoughts. Do not fight with your emotions. Do not resist appearances. Simply see clearly. I, the personal sense of self, is never the truth of your being. I am, the infinite presence, is the truth of your being. And once this distinction is seen, suffering loses its foundation. Fear loses its authority. Limitation loses its support. For everything built upon mistaken identity dissolves when the true identity is recognized. Let us rest in this awareness. False I am creates bondage. True I am reveals freedom. This is the heart of the matter. This is the beginning of liberation. This is the end of suffering. Let us continue deeper. Beloved friends, as we continue in this atmosphere of quiet awareness, let us now touch upon the central realization that every mystic, every enlightened soul, every spiritual teacher has ultimately pointed toward the shift from the personal sense of I to the infinite I am. This shift is what Goldsmith called Christ consciousness. Do not let the term mislead you. Christ consciousness is not a mystical experience reserved for saints. It is not a trance, not a vision, not an emotional ecstasy. It is not something that comes to you, nor something you must reach. Christ consciousness is simply the recognition of the I am as the true identity of your being. The personal I is a mask. The infinite I am is the face behind the mask. The personal I is the shadow. The infinite I am is the light that casts it. The personal I is the dream. The infinite I am is the dreamer. When you live from the personal I, life is a struggle of effort, fear, desire, and reaction. When you live from the infinite I am, life becomes an unfolding of grace, harmony, peace, and divine order. Now, let us be still and consider this quietly. Christ consciousness does not change the world around you. It changes the one who sees the world. And when the seer is changed, the world appears different because it is being seen through the eyes of truth rather than the eyes of fear. Let me say it plainly. The world is not your problem. Your sense of identity is your problem. The moment the personal I governs consciousness, fear becomes natural. The moment the infinite I am governs consciousness, peace becomes inevitable. This is why Jesus could speak and say, I and my Father are one. It was not a declaration of superiority. It was the simple recognition that the I speaking was not the man, not the personality, not the human self, but the infinite presence expressing as individual consciousness. This same recognition is the essence of Christ consciousness. The world thinks Christ consciousness is a higher realm one must ascend to, but the mystic knows that Christ consciousness is the state you enter when you stop identifying with the lower realm altogether. You do not climb to Christ consciousness, you relax into it by releasing the personal sense of self. Let us take this gently. As long as you think I am trying to become spiritual, you are living from the personal I. As long as you believe I need to work harder to be enlightened, you are living from the personal I. As long as you struggle, pray, or beg for divine help, you are living from the personal I. But when you sit in stillness and recognize, I am the presence of God, appearing as this awareness, you step out of the personal altogether. The shift is not dramatic. It is not emotional. It is quiet. It is subtle. It is like the dawn. It appears without announcement, and yet it changes the entire landscape. Now, what happens when this shift occurs? What happens when the personal I recedes and the infinite I am stands revealed? The mind becomes calm, not by discipline, but by absence of the one who worries. The emotions settle, not by control, but by the disappearance of the one who reacts. The body relaxes, not by effort, but by the fading of the one who fears. Guidance appears not through thought, but through the natural intelligence of the infinite expressing itself. You begin to notice something remarkable. Life no longer feels like something you are living. Life begins to feel like something that is being lived through you. This is the hallmark of Christ consciousness. You do not heal. Healing flows as presence. You do not solve problems. Solutions appear as insight. You do not seek supply. Supply unfolds as expression. You do not manufacture peace. Peace rises from within, untouched by circumstance. You are no longer the doer. You are the transparency through which the divine reveals itself. This is why Goldsmith said, I can of mine own self do nothing. He was not admitting weakness. He was declaring truth. He was speaking from Christ consciousness, in which the personal sense of I has dissolved. And hear this gently. When the personal sense of self dissolves, the infinite does not replace it. The infinite was always there. It is simply unveiled. Christ consciousness is not something you acquire. It is something you recognize. It is the natural state of your being once the false identity is released. Let the personal I fall away. Let it fade like a dream you no longer need. Do not fight it. Do not wrestle with it. Simply see that it is not you. And in the space that remains, the I am of God will stand revealed, quiet, still, radiant, untouched, eternal. This is Christ consciousness. This is your true identity. This is the simple truth behind every healing, every demonstration, every miracle. Let us continue deeper. Beloved friends, as we continue in this atmosphere of deep receptivity, let us come now to one of the most subtle and yet most powerful truths in the spiritual life. It is the truth of recognition, not effort, not affirmation, not mental work, but pure recognition. You see, transformation does not begin with your thoughts. It does not begin with your actions. It does not begin with your emotions. It begins with the shift of awareness that says, quietly and without drama, I am. Not I am this or I am that. Not I am becoming. Not I am trying. Simply I am. This simple recognition, when received within a stillness, does something extraordinary. Though it appears small, almost insignificant, it initiates a profound change throughout your entire being. It touches the deepest center of consciousness, and from that center, it ripples outward into the mind, the emotions, the body, the nervous system, and eventually into the experience of daily life. Let us be very still with this. Recognition is the spark. Grace is the power. Transformation is the effect. You do not transform yourself. You do not heal yourself. You do not improve yourself. You simply recognize the truth. And the truth all by itself begins its work. Goldsmith often said, that the moment you recognize divine presence, even for an instant, even for the briefest flash of awareness, something real begins to happen within you. You may not feel it immediately. You may not see it in your circumstances. But deep within, the activity of God begins to dissolve the old patterns of fear and replace them with the peace of infinite being. Let us understand why. When you recognize I am, you withdraw all belief in the personal self. And the moment the personal self loses your belief, the brain no longer receives signals of fear, threat, and limitation. The nervous system begins to settle. The emotional body begins to quiet. The mind begins to loosen its compulsive grasp. The entire organism responds to identity. When the personal I dominates consciousness, the body reflects tension. When the infinite I am is recognized, the body reflects peace. The world believes that peace is an emotion, but peace is not an emotion. Peace is the natural state of being when the false self is absent. Let us take time to feel this deeply. When a moment of true recognition dawns, you may notice that the breath becomes softer, thoughts become slower, the heart loses its urgency, the mind releases its need to control outcomes. This is not something you do. This is something that happens when you cease standing in the way. Recognition is the removal of obstruction. And what is the obstruction? It is the personal sense of self, the one who fears, the one who worries, the one who tries to make spiritual progress. The instant that false I dissolves, even for a moment, the infinite I am stands revealed. And when the infinite stands revealed, the body, mind, and emotions respond with profound stillness. This is not quiet created by discipline. This is quiet born of truth. You begin to notice that anger cannot rise in the same way because there is no personal self to defend. Fear cannot grip you in the same way because there is no separate self to protect. Worry cannot dominate you in the same way because the infinite has no future to fear. This is the electricity of recognition. It is the invisible current of divine presence moving through consciousness when you rest in truth. And what happens over time? A single recognition deepens into a second expands into a third. Gradually, your inner atmosphere changes. The deep subconscious patterns that once dictated your reactions begin to lose their authority. Old fear responses weaken. Old habits soften. Old mental loops dissolve. You are not doing anything. You are witnessing the activity of the I am. This is why Goldsmith said that spiritual growth does not come from effort, but from repeated moments of recognition. Each moment builds upon the one before, until the infinite becomes the background of your awareness, and the personal self becomes only a faint memory of who you once believed yourself to be. Let this truth wash over you gently. Recognition is the doorway. Grace is the activity. Peace is the fruit. The infinite does not need your help. It needs your openness. And recognition, simple, quiet recognition, is the openness through which the divine does its perfect work. Let us continue deeper. Beloved friends, now that we have touched the meaning of recognition, let us turn to the question that inevitably arises in every sincere seeker. How do I live this teaching? How do I embody it in the midst of ordinary life? And the answer, as Goldsmith taught throughout his entire ministry, is wonderfully simple. Not easy, but simple. The transformation of consciousness does not come through occasional inspiration. It comes through daily practice, not a practice of words, not a practice of effort, not a practice of trying to force spiritual awareness, but a practice of quiet recognition. Goldsmith called it the practice of the presence. And it is the simplest of all practices because it is the practice of being still. It is not meditation in the sense the world teaches meditation, not a technique, not a system, not a method used to obtain a desired outcome. It is simply the gentle returning of awareness to the truth that is already present. Let us be very clear. True spiritual practice is the act of remembering who you are and forgetting who you are not. You do not sit in silence to change the world. You sit in silence to stop believing the world has power. You do not sit in silence to heal the body. You sit in silence to recognize the body has no identity. You do not sit in silence to attract supply. You sit in silence to recognize the infinite source that you already are. The daily practice is the moment you turn inward and gently acknowledge, I am here. The presence is here. The infinite is the reality of this moment. No need to repeat it. No need to force it. Simply rest in it till the words fall away. And now let us walk through this practice step by quiet step. 1. Sit in silence without seeking. The first part of the practice is to sit in silence with no intention to get, fix, achieve, or awaken anything. You are not there to improve yourself. You are not there to reach a higher state. You are not there to find peace. You are there to recognize the peace that already is. You may close your eyes. You may leave them open. It does not matter. What matters is the release of effort. Let the body be still. Let the breath be natural. Let thought rise and fall without your involvement. You are not observing the thoughts. You are not resisting them. You are not trying to quiet them. You are discovering that thoughts are not you. 2. Gently notice I without adding anything. After a few quiet breaths, turn your attention inward and simply notice the sense of I. Not the body, not the mind, not the personality, just the awareness of being aware. There is an I that is present before a thought arises, before a feeling appears, before a word is spoken. Rest there. This is the doorway to I am consciousness. 3. Allow the words I am to rise and then fall away. You may gently, inwardly recognize I am. Say it once, then let it go. You are not repeating it. You are not using it as a mantra. You are not trying to believe it. You are letting the truth itself speak through your awareness. When the words fall away, the meaning remains. A silent presence, a living reality, a quiet knowing. This is the heart of the practice. When the personal sense of I falls away, something else begins to rise gently, subtly, quietly. The infinite stands revealed. 4. Rest in the presence until thought loses its authority. As you continue in this inner stillness, you will notice that thoughts may still come, but they no longer have weight. They no longer cling. They no longer demand your attention. It is not because you have controlled them. It is because you are no longer identified with the thinker. Thought has lost its authority because the false I has lost its position. This is the most intimate moment of the practice. The personal self is silent. The infinite self is present. 5. Let the silence do the work. This is the point at which spiritual power begins to move. Not power to change conditions, but power to dissolve the illusions that make conditions appear real. You are not doing anything. You are being lived. This is what Goldsmith meant when he said, do not pray for anything. Pray only for the realization of God's presence, and all things will be added. In this silence, truth performs its own activity. Grace flows. Peace unfolds. Insight reveals itself. You do nothing. The I am does everything. 6. Carry this inner recognition into the day. After your time of practice, whether it is 5 minutes or 20, gently open your eyes and continue with your day. But something has shifted. You walk with a quieter consciousness. You respond with deeper calm. You speak with greater clarity. You move with less fear and more presence. Not because the world has changed, but because the one seeing the world has changed. This is the purpose of daily practice, to anchor your day in truth rather than in the personal self. You may return to this inward recognition many times throughout the day, not long periods, just a breath, a moment, a pause, a quiet returning to the truth. I am here. Each recognition reinforces the next. Each moment of stillness strengthens the foundation of your awareness. Each gentle turning inward dissolves more of the old identity. Over time, the practice becomes natural. It becomes effortless. It becomes the atmosphere in which you live. This is the silent method that awakens I am. This is the practice that Goldsmith used to heal thousands. This is the doorway through which every seeker begins to rest in truth. Let us continue deeper. Beloved friends, we now come to the fruit of this path. Not the promise of it, not the theory of it, but the lived transformation that unfolds naturally when I am ceases to be a concept and becomes your identity. The world believes transformation requires effort, discipline, striving, and improvement. But the mystic knows that transformation begins the moment you stop trying to transform the personal self and instead recognize that the personal self was never the truth of your being. What happens when this recognition becomes steady? When the infinite I am becomes the background of your awareness, not only in meditation, not only in moments of inspiration, but in the ordinary flow of your daily life. Let us explore this gently, one unfolding at a time. 1. Reaction dissolves and is replaced by response. In the personal sense of self, life is a series of reactions. Reacting to fear, reacting to threat, reacting to emotion, reacting to memory. But when I am becomes your center, reaction fades because there is no personal self left to defend. You begin to respond instead quietly, clearly, without urgency, without tension. You speak less from fear and more from insight. You act less from impulse and more from presence. You move less from habit and more from intuition. This is not self-control. This is selflessness, the absence of the personal I. 2. Fear loses its foundation. Fear does not disappear because conditions improve. Fear disappears because the one who feared no longer occupies the throne of consciousness. Fear needs a vulnerable self. Fear needs a threatened self. Fear needs a separate self. When you recognize, I am the presence that cannot be threatened, fear has nothing left to attach to. It may rise, but it has no root. It may whisper, but it has no authority. It may appear, but it cannot remain. In the light of I am, fear is seen as a passing shadow. 3. Guidance becomes natural and effortless. When the personal sense of I is active, guidance is difficult to hear. It is drowned out by noise, by thought, by desire, by fear, by memory. But when the I am becomes your identity, guidance no longer feels like something you must seek. It emerges within you as the natural intelligence of the infinite. You begin to notice that the right words come at the right time. The right actions unfold at the right moment. The right decisions appear without calculation. Your life acquires a quality of timing and flow that no amount of planning could ever produce. Goldsmith called this living by grace. It is not mystical. It is natural. 4. Relationships transform without effort. When the personal self dissolves, the walls it built dissolve with it. Walls of expectation, walls of need, walls of fear, walls of judgment. You begin to see others not as personalities, but as expressions of the same infinite presence that expresses as you. Conflict softens because there is no one left inside you to be offended. Forgiveness arises because there is no personal score to settle. Compassion appears because you see the Christ in every being, not through effort, but through recognition. This is not improved human love. This is divine love expressing without obstruction. 5. The body begins to mirror the harmony of consciousness. The body is never the cause. The body is the instrument. When the personal I is anxious, the body reflects that anxiety. When the personal I is afraid, the body reflects that fear. When the personal I is divided, the body reflects that conflict. But when the personal I dissolves and I am becomes your identity, the body relaxes into a new pattern. Breath deepens. Tension releases. The nervous system settles. Healing processes activate naturally, not because you sought healing, but because the body is finally receiving instructions from the truth of your being rather than the illusions of the personal self. 6. Supply flows from within, not from the world. When you live as the personal I, supply appears external, money, opportunity, support. But when you live as I am, you begin to see supply as an activity of consciousness, not an external resource. Fear of lack dissolves. The sense of striving falls away. You discover that what you need arrives at the moment it is needed, not as excess to stockpile, not as reward for effort, but as the natural expression of the infinite living itself as you. This is not manifestation, this is recognition. 7. Life becomes simpler, quieter, and more harmonious. The greatest miracle of the I Am consciousness is not dramatic healing, not dramatic supply, not dramatic transformation. The greatest miracle is the quieting of the inner world. A life once filled with struggle becomes a life filled with peace. A heart once filled with worry becomes a heart filled with trust. A mind once filled with noise becomes a mind filled with clarity. You do not escape life. You do not retire from life. You do not float above life. You live life, but you live it from the center, not the circumference. Life becomes an unfolding, not a battle, a flow, not a fight, a revelation, not a project. This is real transformation. This is the fruit of the practice of the presence. This is the natural result of living from I am rather than from I. And now, beloved friends, we prepare to conclude this journey. Beloved friends, we have journeyed together through these many moments of stillness, reflection, and revelation, not to gather spiritual concepts, not to acquire mystical ideas, but to awaken to a truth so simple that the world has overlooked it for 2,000 years. The truth that the I you have believed yourself to be was never your identity. Behind the personality, behind the body, behind the mind, behind the history, there has always been a presence, quiet, infinite, untouched, eternal, the I am of your being. This teaching does not ask you to try harder. It does not ask you to force anything. It does not demand belief, ritual, or effort. It invites only one thing, recognition. To pause, to become still, to discover that the awareness you call I is not personal, is not limited, is not separate, but is the very presence of God expressing as you. You are not the seeker of truth. You are the place where truth reveals itself. You are not the one who reaches for God. You are the one through whom God shines. You are not the one struggling to become spiritual. You are the expression of spirit now, here, always. And so the real work, the only work, is the daily, gentle, unforced, returning to the quiet center of your being and hearing again the eternal whisper, I am, not I am this, not I am that, only I am. When this recognition settles into your consciousness, fear dissolves, struggle fades, identity shifts, and life reorganizes itself around truth. This is the promise of every mystic. This is the message behind every scripture. This is the hidden meaning of Jesus' words. I am the way, not the man, not the person, not the personality, but the presence that spoke through him, the presence that speaks through you. As we close this journey, I invite you gently to carry this recognition with you in every moment of your day. Pause, become still, let the personal self fall silent. Feel the quiet presence behind your awareness. Recognize it, rest in it, and let this recognition guide your steps. Soften your heart, open your perception, and live your life. There is nothing more to add, nothing more to seek, nothing more to attain. For the infinite is already your identity, and the I am of God is the truth of your being. Let us rest here, in the peace that requires nothing, in the presence that is always here, in the silence where all transformation begins. I am, and that is enough.